much better. For the leadership cast in particular, it's been a little tougher, as you might imagine, to go out and do things in person, have breakout meetings during the monthlies. So what we're going to start doing is have at least quarterly meetings with you folks. So individually, the ECs and or DECs for your area, we'll go out and pick some time 4 times a year, not a big deal. Try to set up a 30 to 60-minute window. Dave, myself, Rob, and maybe a few others have a quick call. Want to make sure that outside of the emails that we send and the text messages that we fly and do things like that, that we're really having a dialogue about needs being met, making sure that we're working progressively for your group. And I know it's one large group and we all work fairly cohesively, we really do. I want to make sure we're taking care of any other needs that might just require a conversation, because sometimes things come up in conversations that you don't think about when you're typing an email out. So be looking forward to that. Not meant to be an encumbrance, not meant to be any additional overhead. This won't be, but just more of a in-person type of construct to go out and be able to bat ideas around, talk about things that we're doing in the section, and any technical things that we want to work on, any non-technical things that we want to work on. It's really all I've got for this morning. Rob, if you're back.
I'm back. Yep, dropped out and I returned. Yeah, nothing for me right now. Thank you.
Very good. So Dave, if we want to carry on, we can get into the presentation.
All right, that sounds good. Me get back here and find Rob again so I can make him a co-host. Where did he go?
And by the way, if everybody hasn't already battened down their hatches, might be the time to think about doing that. If you've got anything that's vulnerable from a wind perspective. I know it was kind of a interesting warning from the National Weather Service, and it's unusual when they say the words gale warning. Good morning, Gale, by the way, as opposed to Santa Ana event. But they were talking about winds anywhere between 30 to 70 miles an hour in the hills and local mountains. And yesterday it was offshore. They were predicting gale force winds and inland.
And we're losing your audio, Bruce.
And I don't know why. Last night the warning was included. It's interesting. Last night they updated the warning to include coastal areas. So effectively it's from the water through the coast, all the way inland and to the mountains. So if you have vulnerable things out there, if you've got your, if you've still got your canopy up from winter field day, you might consider staking that down or doing something with it. Because I think the expectation is we're going to be a little breezy today. With that, turning it back over to you, Dave, and to our presenters.
All right, Mike, today we have a presentation on the forest fire lookout. I guess Mike is going to start. So Mike, let me find you here, and so you can do a share screen. Where did you go? Well, let's see. Where did Mike go? Don't see him in the list.
You'll be highlighted, Mike.
I'm here, Dave.
All right, you are here. I don't know why I can't find you on the list.
I see him towards
He's near
the top.
He's unmuted, so he's at the top.
Oh, all right. That's why I can't find him. There he is. All right. Let me make you a co-host so you can share a screen. And we'll find Scott here. And I don't see Scott now. I just saw him.
Scott's at the top, unmuted, so he's at the top.
All right, no wonder I can't find these people. They're ahead of me. All right. So, okay, so you're both co-hosts, so you can both share screens. And I'm gonna go ahead and mute myself. And Mike, it's all yours.
Actually, it's Scott that's going to start off. So I'll just change the slides for him. But Scott, go ahead. Hopefully everybody
Okay.
can see my screen now.
I got a white screen on my end. Anyone else see Mike's slide? There it goes. Okay, you're up. And as I was looking at the names, I saw the Swain sisters. Are you the same Swain sisters that used to work High Point?
Indeed, Scott, we are,
We miss you. Good to see you again.
especially opening and closing with the cargo net.
Yes, fond memories. Okay,
Yeah.
good to see you. I'll get started now. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for having us. We're always excited to share the work of the volunteer lookouts, the watch over the backcountry every single day of the fire season. The Lookout's parent organization is the Forest Fire Lookout Association. It was founded in 1990. It operates in most of the 50 states and has members in Canada and Australia. Its purpose is not so much to operate the towers like we do on Palomar Mountain, but to monitor the inventory and preserve the history of these historic icons because they're aging and their numbers are decreasing. The heart of the FFLA, that was your cue, Mike, to switch that slide.
I'm trying, Scotty. Why isn't this responding? Oops.
There it goes.
All right.
All right. The heart of the FFLA is the National Historic Lookout Register. This is the inventory of virtually all remaining and former lookout structures and is accessible to the national website. On this site, you can click on one of the states and bring up every single tower in the state. You see the little red flags there. When you click on a little red flag, you come up on the individual tower and it will show you a picture of that tower. And then down below the picture, click it again, Mike, is a database for that tower, everything you wanted to know. And then there are some tabs that you can click to find the maps and other data about it. So that's our gift to the world, that database, and it's there on the website. Okay, in most states, there's one FFLA director overseeing the state's inventory, but with over 220 towers in California, we break it into 4 divisions. And you see the Southern California division goes from the Mexican border all the way up to Monterey. We have a total of 29 towers in that division and 12 are in active service. I'm the director of the Southern California, what we call the South Division, and there are 5 different chapters or affiliates in the division. And I've spent the last 3 years refurbishing a tower and developing a new chapter of volunteers up in Monterey County. And here's a picture of Chews Ridge Lookout, the newest tower in the fleet, and we brought it online. And it's kind of a scary view because you see in the corner there the Dolan fire taken last September. That fire burnt 200 square miles of wilderness east of Big Sur and threatened our new tower. We had to evacuate it for 2 days after that photo was shot. And we lower the shutters and take out the gear and bug out. And then here's the San Diego Riverside chapter of the FFLA. There are 7 towers in this jurisdiction, and each has its own interesting history. The 3 at the top are now staffed and operating. We'll talk about those in a minute. But the ones at the bottom, you see Estelle Mountain. It was built in 1935 near Lake Elsinore. And in 1960, it was moved to the Hemet Ryan Cal Fire Air Base for use as a control tower. Then Lions Peak Tower is located east of Hamul in South County. Not yet, Mike. Oop. It's been abandoned, but it's still serviceable, and it's in an island of Cleveland National Forest surrounded by private property, so access to the tower is not possible by ground. But we're just waiting for when that access issue gets resolved, and the FFLA will train up a bunch of East County people, staff it up, and put that one back in service, if that ever happens. And the Allwood Tower on Hot Springs Mountain, which is the next one there, it's east of Warner Springs on the Los Coyotes Indian Reservation. The interesting history on that one is it was built during World War II, so all the steel and iron went to the war effort, and it was built out of wood, and now they're paying the price for that construction. So the FFLA's job now, our grim task, is to monitor and document its demise. So every year we crawl up there and take pictures of its decomposition. And then the last one there is the ugly duckling of the fleet. That's Red Mountain. And you guys are probably aware of all those repeaters, towers that are up there on just east of Interstate 15 near Fallbrook. It's been turned into a repeater vault for telecommunications gear up on that peak. So now we'll narrow this down locally to the operations on Palomar Mountain. And here you see the locations of the two towers up there. And here are close-ups of our two babies. And you see there are two different logos. The towers are owned by two different government agencies. So we get to partner with both the state government and the federal government. Booker Hill sits within the Palomar Mountain State Park, so it's a state facility. High Point sits in the Cleveland National Forest, and it's therefore owned by the U.S. Forest Service. So this results in working two different radio systems. State Parks uses non-trunking 800 megahertz frequencies, and the Forest Service works on a 2-meter band. For inter-tower comms, we use multi-use radio system, or MERS, which runs on 151 to 154 megahertz. And this system is just a tad better than those cheap little plastic FRS radios, but it works really well up there. In fact, we reach from Palomar Mountain, we can reach the operators at the Los Pinos Tower over by Lake Morena. It's amazing. So let's turn this over now to Mike to describe daily operations.
Thanks, Scott. I guess the first operational question is who are the lookouts and where do they come from? We've got approximately 75 volunteers at present, drawn from San Diego and Riverside counties, of whom roughly 50 are men and 25 are women, with an average age of our volunteers in the late 50s. It's really a cross-section of actively employed and retired folks. Among our ranks are current or former aerospace engineers, machinists, doctors, like Judy was, or is, but who was a volunteer, government employees, contractors, and military firefighting and law enforcement personnel, among others. And there's even an anthropologist in there somewhere. Common motive is an interest, though, in helping in public safety in the backcountry. So as lookouts, we perform several jobs, which I'll talk about 5 of them. But job 1 is fixed point fire detection, which is a fancy way of saying, what can you see in terms of fires from one point, one fixed point? The lookouts are required to perform a detailed 360-degree scan with binoculars every 15 minutes. And for those math freaks among you, with 50 miles of visibility on a clear day, theoretically, lookouts are scanning 10,000 square miles of the Earth's surface. Obviously, it isn't that much because of limits in visibility and the ocean and so on, but the bottom line is that's a lot of territory. And although you're required to perform a detailed scan every 15 minutes, I can tell you everybody's head is on a swivel all the time, especially in conditions like we're experiencing today. This is what lookouts are looking for. There's a smoke. You can see it in sort of just to the left of center of the picture, with the smoke drifting to the left. This is what we're looking for, but the goal is to spot it well before it gets to be this size. When the wind is blowing, as we all know, fires grow almost unimaginably fast. And a quick spot can be the difference between a fire that's contained within an acre or so, or something that turns into a regional catastrophe like the 2003 or 2007 Witch Creek fires, the Cedar and Witch Creek fires. So spotting is the first step, but the ability to accurately communicate its location is equally crucial. The lookout needs to relay to the dispatcher an azimuth or compass heading from the tower, a distance from the tower, and a nearby landmark, so that appropriate ground or air resources can be dispatched to investigate the smoke and or suppress the fire. They'll make the decision exactly what's done based on where it is, conditions, and resources available. And to obtain these pieces of data, this is where the Osborne Firefinder, which you see the lookout using there, comes in. And the Firefinder is a piece of cutting edge technology circa 1915, and it still works really well. And obviously the firefinder doesn't actually find the fire. It lets you describe where the fire is, helps you get the data to describe where the fire is. So the way it works is the smoky spot is lined up with sights and crosshairs on the outer edges of the firefinder. And the firefinder is calibrated along the outside with degrees, 360-degree compass heading. So that gives you your azimuth. You'll notice there's a map under the glass in the middle of the ring. The tower is at the pivot point in the center of the map under the glass. And there's a sighting tape that runs along the sight line, which allows you to identify locations on the map easily for landmarks. The range or distance is then determined using increments that are marked on the sighting tape. And then in the command center, when you relay all this in by radio, the dispatchers take this 1915 era derived technology or data, and what they do is they put it into their WIZO computer aided dispatch system, which automatically electronically maps it, and that can get distributed digitally. As Scott mentioned, there's different primary radio systems that are used in the two towers, but there is a place for amateur radio. And we do have about a dozen of our lookouts who are licensed amateurs, several of whom are currently active in either ARES and or ACS. Each tower is equipped with a ham go kit. Here you can see it on the right, at least barely. That's for those equipment geeks among you. It's a Yaesu 8900 quad band and a Yaesu FT60 HT in there. And this can be used as emergency backup. And we did use it years ago for communication between the towers. But because there's so many few licensed amateurs versus other volunteers, that's why we went to the MERS system that Scott mentioned for like everyday communication between the towers. So in addition to being an emergency backup, though, we do use still amateur radio for project work. And here's an example of that, where even with the topo maps and a familiarization with the area from having worked up there, it's still hard to judge distances and figure out landmarks, especially in hazy conditions. So we have panorama photographs in each tower. This is one of them, with labels that show a particular location, a cross street or a peak, and distance from the tower. And the way we developed this was we had amateur radio operator volunteers in their four-wheel drive vehicles that would go out to little dirt crossroads or particular locations we wanted to be able to spot from the tower. They would be in communication with the tower via ham radio. They would do a signal mirror flash to the tower, and the person in the tower with a blank copy of this photograph could then mark it on the map, and then later we could label it digitally. And you think this, there must be an easier way to do this with Google Earth and so on, but not really, because we really want to know what it looks like from the tower. And from that perspective, it's very difficult when there's areas behind ridges that you can't see, and just little pieces of ridges that you can partially see. This proved to be a really effective way to do it. And now just for a few photos of some events you may remember and what they look like from the towers. This was the beginning of the May 14th and 15th, 2014 fire siege in North County looked like from Booker. The plume on the left is 37 miles away from the towers. Oops, wrong slide. The plume on the left is 37 miles away, but an unusual thing for this is you can actually see the flames at the base of the column of the smoke. But I mean, this is a great illustration of why it's super important to catch these fires early, because this developed soon after what you saw on the previous slide. So spotting the smokes, calling it in, that was job one for volunteers. Job two is to verify reports of smokes or fires called in by the public. People on cell phones who see something and don't know where they are, much less where they're looking. And so often there's confusion about exactly where the smoke is. So we will get traffic from dispatch saying, can you glass an area? Can you look at it with the binoculars and see if you can verify that there's a smoke in that location? And in this case, the lookout knew this was actually it was a cold morning, and this was a ranch house's fireplace that was being started, which sent out a good puff of smoke. So they were able to wave off a response by fire crews, which would have obviously wasted time and resources. Job three for a lookout is weather reporting. The National Weather Service climatologists put a lot of effort into predicting the weather so that firefighters can predict fire behavior, but there's always localized conditions. And with every shift, the lookout takes weather readings twice during the shift. And it's typical when you go in service in the morning, dispatch will ask you to report your fire weather. And then you will update as needed during the day if there's substantial wind shifts or other changes. And as you notice, the lookout there is using a sling psychrometer, which takes dry and wet bulb temperatures. And it's interesting that even though we've got a digital weather station in the tower, for consistency, for reliability, for sort of bulletproofness, we still take the readings the old-fashioned way as well. Job four for the lookouts is paying attention to storms. And when you look at the storms from down here near the coast and you see clouds like this gathering over the mountains, you will have a pretty good idea that the volunteer lookouts in the towers are having an electric day. And this is what it looks like in High Point. This was a storm that was moving up from Mexico in midsummer. So you can see some of the different storm cells in the rain. And this is a photograph that happened to be taken at the same instant of a lightning strike. And that's the illumination you see there in the foreground. Lightning strikes cause a lot of wildfires, and it's your duty to record the number and location of the lightning strikes as they occur. Now, when the cell is near you, you close the windows, you turn off the radio, you turn off all electricity, and there's a fire stool you can stand on. You can see that high piece of technology there, which is a wooden stool with a couple of, or 4 insulators on the bottom. But that's really, I think, more psychological than anything else, because the photo at the bottom illustrates how well grounded the tower actually is. That's an antenna on top of the big steel tower at High Point. And the lookout was recording lightning strikes, saw a huge flash, didn't see the lightning strike, instantaneous boom of the thunder. That was an antenna that was destroyed a couple of feet directly above the lookout's head. And the lookout, didn't feel any tingling, didn't feel anything unusual. It grounded perfectly. Here's an example of, that slide got cut off somehow. A lightning strike spotted fire. This is near the Chihuahua Valley area, as seen from High Point Tower. And what's difficult, especially during storms, is at the same time you're looking for smoke, there's rainfall, there's mist, there's water dogs, which are little wisps of fog that look like smoke, and then actual smokes. The one on the right, looks a little weird because it's a fisheye web lens there, but that was a fire that started as a lightning strike, but it was undetected for 4 days as it smoldered in sort of the duff on the forest floor. And when the conditions were right, erupted into a fire 4 days, a visible fire 4 days later. So that's why we record the location of the lightning strikes as best we can. So those can be checked by fire crews and kept an eye on by the lookouts in subsequent days. So job 5 for lookouts is being docents or doing public relations. The Booker Hill Tower within the state park is open to the public. So if you enjoy interacting with people, and there's a lot of people curious about fire service history and lookouts specifically, you're, in addition to your fire watch duties, usually there's 2 lookouts assigned, one of them to keep an eye on things and the other to help with interpretive tasks for the visitors. If you're more of a hermit on the mountaintop sort of person, High Point is the one for you. That's the Forest Service operated tower, or Forest Service jurisdiction tower, and visitors are not allowed in that tower. So you've got lots of peace and quiet up there. There's a couple other jobs, which we're near the end of our time, so I won't really go into, but the Forest Service wants us to report sightings of, it's called reportable wildlife, but it's basically threatened or endangered species or invasive species that are problematic. And here's some examples of things that they would like us to report if we see them or if visitors report them. Sort of among the handful of things that they really want to know about is they want to know about mountain lions, golden eagles, wild boars, mountain king snakes. And there's a picture, this wasn't a picture taken in the tower, it's just illustrative. There was a bear spotted near High Point in 2014. Another thing we do is projects on a sort of a one-off basis. We get funding. Scott mentioned that the group is big into restoration and historic preservation. So we'll sometimes get grant money to do capital improvements of the towers and their grounds. And here's a work crew of lookout volunteers installing a refurbished sign for Booker. One of the sort of steady projects we do each year is the opening and closing of towers. For the winter, the towers are shuttered. The equipment is taken out and secured. And in fact, notwithstanding the gale force winds predictions that Bruce mentioned earlier, Scott and I are actually going up to Booker immediately after this to help with the close down of Booker. So hopefully we get there before the winds do. And that's the end of our presentation. And this is normally where we would do our recruiting pitch. Not that we want to steal members from ARES, but if you're looking for an additional thing to do. But with our COVID times, our recruiting is a bit on hold because some of the training, especially with the Forest Service, has to be done in person, including training on emergency fire shelters and things like that. So recruiting's on hold for the moment, but if you're interested, I would absolutely encourage you to visit our website. There's information on volunteer opportunities there when it does open up again. And Scott and I are happy to take questions.
All right, we had one question in chat. Most mountains have remote controlled webcams. Are they replacing the lookouts?
Ooh, great question. The answer is no. They are a tool. And one thing I left out is that, lookouts went out of service. A lot of lookouts went out of service in the 80s when there were budget cuts, and it was thought that technology would replace human eyes in spotting fires, and that everybody was getting a cell phone, and so there was lots of people reporting fires. Well, as mentioned before, with cell phones, the problem is people often don't know where they are, much less are able to describe where the smoke is that they are seeing. And secondly, things like satellites can spot hotspots, but the thing is, you want to catch the fire at that first little puff of smoke before it grows into something that is big enough to pass the threshold of noise filtering for heat signatures from satellites. And it turns out the human eye is still the best instrument for distinguishing quickly between a dust cloud, a puff of diesel from construction equipment, or something that is in fact an early ignition of brush.
Another question, let me bring chat back up again here so I can find it. Is there a sighting map app or an app that would be useful for sighting or marking fires?
As far as sighting, well, for sighting landmarks that help you aid in seeing where the fires are, there's several really good apps. There's Peak Finder, for example, for your iPhone, that you can hold up, and its view is your view, and it labels at least some of the peaks that you're looking at. In terms of the locating and tracking fires, the county, and I believe the city as well, has a geographic information system where they plot the fires in real time, and it's information that's fed in through, from the responding agencies. And so fire managers can look at in real time sort of the mapped edges of the fire. So Scott, I don't know if you can elaborate further on that, but GIS is a commonly used tool for fire tracking now.
No, I have nothing to add.
All right, from another Mike's mentioned a year or so ago that the service was standardizing on DMR. Did that happen or did it not happen?
Sorry, did I hear right, DMR?
DMR radios, correct.
Yes, in terms of standardization, like I said, we have a dozen or so lookouts who are amateur radio operators. And we did have a number of folks were interested in going to DMR, trained in DMR. But in terms of, it hasn't really become standardized across all users. And the Go kits we still have are still all analog. So yes, there are a number of folks who now use DMR. Not everybody who's an amateur uses DMR at this point. And our FFLA owned equipment is not DMR at this point.
Okay, that's all the questions I see in chat. Let's see. Yeah, that's all the questions I see in chat. If anybody have any additional questions or so, you could raise your hand by going to the reactions and bringing it up that way. Okay, Bruce has a question. Go ahead, Bruce.
No, it was more of a chuckle. I was in contact with the Forest Service lookout on Los Pinos the day of that actual lightning strike. And I was tracking the storm pretty actively because of the radar loop maps showing it pretty much on course to have a direct path over the top of the hill. And indeed, it was going that direction. And she had indicated that she was on her way out anyway. She wasn't sticking around. Stay a little bit longer, as the case might have been. I've still got the screen captures of the actual cells going right over the top of the hill, and everybody knows the rest of the story. The description from the lookout was very interesting. She was pretty graphic about the experience, and it's not something that I would advise anybody go through voluntarily. But even at that time, with the grounding on the tower that was there, she was perfectly safe. And immediately after that strike, they went out and did a very significant, several-month-long reinvestment into redoing the original grounding for when that tower was put up, and improved upon it quite a bit. I don't know why they improved upon it. It seemed to be perfectly okay at the time, but perhaps it was a code upgrade. Interesting stories. I've got lots of those for that particular site. And thank you very much for your presentation this morning.
Yeah, very good presentation. Now we got several questions. Judy?
Oh, just a comment that this is a really great organization to belong to, especially for anybody who lives kind of out in Northeast County, so it gets a little bit easier to get there. But I encourage you to look into it. And I don't, would you guys mention what your requirements, number of tower days, if you're a member, Mike or Scott?
Yeah, I can take a shot at that. Scott, correct me if I'm wrong. It's half a dozen for the year. But the world is changing, as you know. This year, usually a typical fire season, and that's not technically correct anymore. There is no fire season in Southern California anymore, no official fire season. But typically the towers would open based on what resources were available from the feds in the state when they shift around fire resources. So we would open typically end of April, do training of new folks, and fully operational no later than the 1st of May. And typically it would end based on weather. The call would be made that the season would end somewhere in the November, early December timeframe. Well, this year we extended through the start of February because of conditions. So the minimum requirements were based on, you know, a shift a month kind of thing. But people often find out that they want to work more shifts than just 6, just to keep familiar and keep up with it. But 6 is usually the minimum number.
Okay. Somebody asked how many steps to the top of High Point Tower, and Judy answered 99 if she remembers correctly. Is that pretty close?
I don't remember the number of the steps, but Scott, isn't the catwalk 135 feet above ground level?
Yeah, and boy, I used to have the number of steps. And Judy, I bet you're real close, if not spot on.
All right. We had a question from Gary.
I have heard that lightning can strike up to 10 miles away from where you think it's centered. What's your protocol when you're in a tower as far as staying inside where it's safe or being outside to bug out or something? Could you comment briefly on that?
Scott may be able to answer if there's a recommended distance away that you start taking precautions. I don't remember that, but the precautions are, yes, you stay inside, you close the windows so that the current can't follow moisture and air movement. You shut off the electricity, turn off the radio, shut off the electricity, and get up on the lightning stool while you're doing your downstrike mapping. So I don't, but it's when the cell is approaching your tower is what they say.
In the manual, I think it says 2 miles, which has you counting 10 seconds from flash to boom. And when it gets
Right.
down to that, that's when you shut down.
And that's pretty close.
Yeah, it's
pretty
real close.
All right.
And
any
I'm just glad that I thought when Bruce started his comment, he was going to make a joke about lightning stools, but I'm glad he didn't.
I'm sure he has one if he would care to hop back in. Any additional questions? Well, I don't see anything hopping up in chat.
Just
Thank you,
one
Mike.
comment, sorry,
Yeah.
from Julie Swain. And since Scott and everybody took over, it's they've done such an amazing job of teaching people. So, learning and being a volunteer is amazing. When I started, it was hardly any teaching. It was sort of learn on your own, but these guys have done a most fantastic job getting this whole organization going and staffing the towers. It's amazing.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? All right, thank you, Scott and Mike. That was a great presentation. I think we all learned a lot, and hopefully we can, you'll get a few volunteers out of this.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right, anytime. Thank you. All right, Rob, you want to start with the EC portion of this?
Yeah, let's time to stop the recording. I think we're going to transition into breakout rooms now. Bruce, is that what you'd like to do?
Sorry, I needed to come off of mute. Yes, please.